be okay. Remember Bob Newby, superhero.
Stranger Things is a big ol' hot mess. Particularly Season 3, which has some of the most asinine and egregious creative decisions I've ever seen that I simply could not sleep without making a video on it. Which would explain my insomnia for the past 4 years. This show has undergone an incredibly bizarre change over the course of its run. It started as this exciting little show about a group of people shaken by the sudden and mysterious disappearance of one Will Byers, and with its 3rd season has become a Saturday morning cartoon show with absolutely no irony or self-awareness in this transformation. So this video is not only going to be a justifiable bashing on that abhorrent season of television, but I also want to open up a wider discussion on how the show ended up this way, and if, at the end of the day, that was a good decision or a bad decision. But in order to do that, we need to establish a baseline, so let's briefly go over why Season 1 frickin' slaps. Season 1! Yay! Fuck, what is this? Stranger Things 1 is and always will be the best season of the show. I'm sorry to all of you Season 4 elitists out there, but I'm afraid I'm gonna have to not so humbly disagree. In my opinion, what makes this season work so well is its characters. The mystery is simple enough to grab you. Kid goes missing under extremely bewildering supernatural circumstances. But the true gravitational pull comes down to how the characters react to this event. Joyce, Will's mother, is mortified by the situation. She can't make heads or tails of it. She's immediately paranoid and suspicious about the whole thing. Of course, she has every right to be, since she's seeing lights flickering and monsters tearing through her wall and sees her son in a parallel dimension calling out to her, which is kind of hard to believe if you are, you know, a normal person. And this creates excellent and engaging friction between Joyce and her other son, Jonathan. While Joyce is spouting all this fantasy gobbledygook, Jonathan is practically mourning the loss of his younger brother, and the decoy body they find in the lake only amplifies the strain on their relationship, since to him, Will is actually dead and Joyce is in denial.
I am not gonna stop looking for him until I find him and bring him home. I am going to bring him home!
Yeah, well, you're talking to the lights. The rest of us are having a funeral for Will. I'm not letting him sit in that freezer another day. Show's over.
You also have Police Chief Jim Hopper, who I have to say is probably my favorite character of the whole season. He's a drunk bachelor type of guy, you know, rough around the edges, but also to give him some credit, he lost his daughter to cancer and his wife divorced him and moved out of Hawkins. So my guy's a bit down bad. So he's able to lend this emotional support to Joyce, as well as committing himself to solving the mystery surrounding Will's vanishing act. This all culminates into one of my favorite scenes of the entire show. Everything that I just summarized builds up to this intense climax, where Joyce and Hopper find an unconscious Will in the Upside Down, and they just, well look.
He's not breathing! He's not breathing!
Joyce, listen to me. Would you tilt his head back and lift his chin? Come on, kid. Come on, kid.
Will, listen to me. It's me. It's your mom. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you more than anything in the world. Please.
Blood pressure keeps dropping.
Of course, gotta bring the dead daughter back. Gotta bring her back to the climactic scene.
Flatlining.
Come back to me. Breathe. I need you to wake up now. I need you to breathe. Breathe. That's it. Oh my God. That's it.
Like, that's just so good. This scene slaps so freaking hard. And a huge part of that has nothing to do with special effects or grand monster battles or even necessarily the sad music playing in the background, but because I cared about the characters and I was so invested in their heartbreak that I so badly wanted to see them succeed. And I love that there isn't like some mystical objective to get the 3 McMuffins or whatever in order to free Will from the Upside Down. They just have to give him CPR. When the show gets to its pivotal emotional moments, this fantastical scenario becomes grounded so immediately by how seriously and realistically it's being treated. Special shout out to both David Harbour and Winona Ryder's acting in this scene. It's emotionally tangible enough to where it's frighteningly realistic, and that makes this moment all the more tender in my eyes. It's these intimate intimate character portraits that are contextually enriched by the horrific circumstances beyond their current comprehension that makes this season one that I intensely fall in love with. A great moment that absolutely destroyed me was when Joyce goes to see Will in his little fort, and they're laughing and having a good time.
Mom, I'm not 5 anymore. Stop, it's so stupid.
Until this shotgun of a transition blasts us to the present as we now spectate a derelict Castle Byers as cries for Will echo out across the forest. Oh my god? Another one of my favorite scenes that sticks out to me the most is a flashback when Will and Jonathan are listening to The Clash as their parents are having their own clash outside the room, also known as a divorce. It's this nurturing moment where Jonathan is introducing Will to this escapism in music and they bond through this connection, swinging their their heads back and forth. It's one of the few moments that reminds me that while this show does take place in the 80s, it never beats you over the head with it in this first season. It serves as a great time period for the pastiche the Duffer Brothers are going for, but it also feels like a movie from that period. And these two moments perfectly illustrate the dynamic between Joyce and Jonathan. You see this mother who desperately wants to find her son, someone who only she believes at this point to still be alive, as do us as the audience. But you also can perfectly understand Jonathan's grief and anger towards her for not treating the situation with the same sort of normalcy that one would expect. As the audience, we have no bias for who to side with. It's an incredibly measured way of looking at these characters' different perspectives and contrasting beliefs and motivations. This is the kind of stuff I love seeing in Stranger Things. It's just it's so human. I feel like I'm watching characters and the show is engaging me by making me care about those characters. Oh, I forgot to mention that there are also some rascallion kids roaming around as well. They act as the kind of lighter side / comedic relief to contrast this emotionally grounded doozy. They're the ones fully committed to solving the mystery, and along their way they find this girl in the woods named 11 because she was an escaped lab rat being experimented on. She's got cool telekinetic powers. I don't have to go over everything, you get the idea. There's this tangible childlike whimsy as we follow the kids unraveling this grand mystery, their youthful exuberance rubbing off so easily onto the viewer that it's impossible not to let our imaginations run wild alongside their adventures. Even though I have not nearly as much to say about the kids, they're just as important as the adults in their situation, and I feel echo the points I made but in closer relation to the supernatural at hand. My main point is that season 1 of Stranger Things is an effectively engaging mystery that has an excellently written and acted emotional foreground, complemented by a joyous and whimsical group of children solving a mystery involving monsters and superpowers. Jackson, write shorter sentences. This season just pulls you in so effortlessly and doesn't let go until you're left hungry for more. I hope I did a good enough job at conveying why I think season 1 still holds up magnificently and why I care so much not only about the world, but also its characters. Because season 3 makes me want to tear out my hair and feed it to my cat. And she's vegan. Season 3. Oh boy, I've been holding on to this for a while. But you know what? I'm feeling like a light entree to start with. Let's go nice and easy with the Nancy and Jonathan subplot. Because if I go into the truly horrible stuff this early, I am going to die. Nancy and Jonathan's subplot perfectly exemplifies how the show has become so much more cartoonish than I ever feel it should be. I'm not just talking about the over-the-top misogynist newspaper reporters she works for, but they are a special breed of their own.
The death of small-town America. I like it. I like it a lot. But I think I've got something even spicier. It's about the missing mustard on my hamburger.
In fact, I think this has got to be a book. The Mysterious Case of the Missing Fertilizer, a Nancy Drew mystery.
There's this scene where the head honcho of the bunch, who has been infected by the monsters of the Upside Down, literally kicks the scene into a Dutch angle.
The trust of our community.
Tom, if you just
Do you know how I built that trust?
Oh dude, that's how you know he's serious. And it's like, You can't expect me to take this seriously, not with a post-processed Dutch angle. But the creme de la creme of this turn to goofy spooks has to be Lady O'Driscoll.
Yes,
Mrs. Driscoll.
yes,
Hi, I'm Nancy.
yes,
Nancy Wheeler. We spoke briefly on the phone last night.
yes.
From the Hawkins Post.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. Oh, you look too young for reporters. Yes.
Who also has become a part of the Mind Flayer's independent production of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But she has resorted to eating fertilizer and also is my favorite character of this godforsaken season.
Driscoll.
Me when there's one slice of cake left in the fridge.
Let me go!
Doris, we need you to stay calm for us, okay? Stay calm.
I have to go back!
I have to go back! I have to go back! I have to go back!
Oh, that's real spooky, guys. You got me. Oh boy, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to sleep tonight, not with that image in my head. Now, sure, I'm laughing at this and having a great time whenever she's on screen, but my problem is, I can't tell if this is intentional or not. There are scenes with a legitimately creepy and disgusting monster made of human gore that work really well, so I know the show is capable of harnessing this more horrific tone. But then you have this lady trying to work in tandem with that, and they just don't match. Couple that with the fact that this season in general carries a much lighter tone in its setting and characters, and I'm not able to smoothly transition from the funny bad to the scary bad as easily as the show begs me to. So if this stuff in season 3 is not meant to be funny, then they failed spectacularly. But if it was meant to be funny, then they succeeded, but at the cost of disconnecting me from the stakes of the story, because there's no edge sharp enough to keep me engaged with whatever legitimate threat you're teasing me with. But one last thing before I effortlessly transition into the next worst part of this season is how the emotionally grounded part of the show that I fell in love with so dearly is butchered and sold past its expiration date. After the Dutch angle debacle, Nancy and Jonathan lose their jobs at the Post, leading to a heated argument between the couple that I actually liked. It felt dynamic, with both sides making great points. Jonathan makes a good point about their family not being well off, and jobs like this being important to keep their family afloat. This leads to resentment towards Nancy for having a much more fortunate upbringing, and he's frustrated with her for pursuing this case even though he warned her not to. Nancy also makes some good points, with one being the obvious misogyny, but also that she resents that image of herself that she's been given everything on a silver platter. And she even antagonizes Jonathan for being just like those assholes who bully her in the workplace. You see, it's a good dynamic fight where there isn't a clear right or wrong side to pick, but each one also carries a bit of selfishness to it. This then leads to Nancy having a heart-to-heart with her mother, in a rare pairing we don't get to see throughout a lot of the series. You know, it's moments like these that I'm glad still somewhat find themselves mixed with the DNA of the newer seasons, because it allows characters to actually contemplate and confront the issues they're having in a graceful and intimate way. Too bad they messed it all up! This entire conflict ends with a quick scene between the two in an elevator where Nancy goes,
Those things that I said yesterday, I didn't mean them.
"What?
I know.
What?"
I don't think I was just...
Angry, which I still don't get. I mean, I was just completely, utterly, mortifyingly wrong.
What?
I just look forward to you never doubting me again.
What? Okay, I'm sorry. This whole argument between them actually had no weight at all whatsoever, as Jonathan literally forfeits his argument to Nancy just because she was right about the weird things that were happening. Which, like, sure, but you should have already believed her because you all went through this horrifying demon nightmare hellscape. twice! So for one, it boggles my mind that this never occurred to you that she might actually have been onto something. But I also realized that this dynamic fight between the two was essentially plotted to be in Nancy's favor. Because Jonathan just admits he was wrong, which, sure, but also, he was right to be pissed off about getting fired. And Nancy doesn't apologize for getting the two fired, and instead forgives him, and the two just make up after that. Not only did we get a one-sided sympathy ploy, but we were also robbed of an actually satisfying conclusion or retrospective, which, it might surprise you, is a recurring theme in this season. Alright, let's dig into one of the entrees now. Mike and 11. The power couple who only was officially a thing for like 6 seconds. Mike and Elle's breakup takes up what I feel to be a majority of the first half of this season, and oh, it's just so awful. Oh God. The worst part about it for me, personally, is that it all spirals out of control from what essentially boils down to be a misunderstanding trope. Mike and Elle start dating in the 3rd season, to the dismay of Hopper, who gets real upset one night, and rightfully so, in my opinion. Mike is one of my least favorite characters of this whole season, because his protective father figure shtick is acting up once again, and so he threatens Mike never to see Elle ever again. Therefore, when confronted by Elle about this, he continues this silly lie that Hopper led with about his sick grandmother or whatever, which makes her extremely suspicious and seeks confidence in Max, a character who she's had some previous friction with in the 2nd season after seeing her with Mike. But that's apparently not interesting enough to the showrunners, so they make up in like a few seconds. Eventually, she breaks up with Mike because of his goofy behavior, and the first half of this season devolves into this aggravating back and forth that is probably the worst way you could have handled this type of situation. I have tried to rewrite this section of the script 4 times now, and every time I think I have a grasp on why I hate this subplot, I prove myself wrong! I think I found a plot hole, but then that hole quickly fills up with cement once I actually re-watch the footage in editing, and therefore my argument folds. And so I have no choice but to come to the basic conclusion that this plot is dumb and I hate it. I really think that's it, honestly. Well, no, I mean, there's more, obviously. For one thing, the show unintentionally succeeded at making me hate these characters very early on in this season. You've made Mike kind of an unlikable brat who isn't in with the cool kids, you know? He doesn't like Dustin's hammer that can just freaking smash a skull in. And Mike and Elle are actively withdrawing from the group and their fun, youthful antics, which is a bold move from the writers to ditch the dynamics that were a central element to the series before this point. So you've done a really good job at making me not like this central duo. Then you step further down into depravity and create this contrived plot where Hopper threatens Mike, but then he fumbles his chance at redemption by continuing the granny fib and doesn't opt to tell Elle right away about Hopper's involvement. Seriously, Mike could have just told Elle about Hopper's threats from the very start. He had no reason not to, except the inexplicit threats towards his life, which I mean, whatever. Snowflake. And it might have motivated Elle to have a private talk with Hopper. Then he could have read the note that he was going to read them that night before he quit the whole calm and collected thing cold turkey. He eventually does in the 4th episode, but things have only gotten more complicated by that point for it to make any relevant impact on the plot. So thanks a lot for that, genius! It's frustrating because Mike knows what he's done wrong. He knows he's messed up. But then when Elle breaks up with him, it's like all of that somewhat built up character introspection and self-awareness gets thrown right out the window, and he's like, wow, women are a different species.
You don't understand what I did to deserve this.
Nothing. You were the victim here.
I know, it's just why is she treating me this way? I don't know. Because women act on emotion and not logic.
Precisely.
Yeah, we're trying to solve the great mystery of the female species.
I don't know what Judge Doom Toontown sewage breach leaked into the Hawkins water supply, but these characters act in such a goofy and tedious way that every scene with them feels like a mosquito buzzing around me while I'm trying to just peacefully watch a show. You could make the argument that it's a realistic portrayal of falling in love for the first time and not knowing how to handle those types of feelings, as Mike conveniently exposits towards the end of the season without much established setup to this cathartic realization. However, not only is this supposed to be a show for entertainment, and therefore handling it with this much tedium and weightlessness feels counterintuitive to that idea, but I would also like to remind you that this whole conflict was a result of Hopper's meddling. If you want to have a serious conversation about this type of experience, then create a more fulfilling catalyst behind that conflict. Having these characters essentially run circles around each other all because of a burly boy's overprotective interference is an insanely uninteresting plot to follow along with that carries very little practical weight. This grating story comes to a lukewarm boiling point in one of my least favorite scenes in the whole season. This scene basically puts everything out on the table. Mike still can't fathom the idea of Elle being her own person who has free will, even though he's been capable of sympathy several times in the past. It's revealed to the group that Elle and Max spied on them, and all that gets is a bit of a "what's that?" and then that problem quickly goes away. And the grand finale.
So can we please just come up with a new plan, because I love her and I can't lose her again?
Oh my goodness! Was that the L word I just heard? Well, that changes everything! A new perspective, you might concur.
Look, I really don't know how to describe it. I just hate hearing these kids argue and fuss over this meaningless storyline, especially when it interrupts the main storyline. Nancy and Jonathan are actively trying to figure something out when the show decides it's a great time to involve the couple with these senseless trivialities. I genuinely fail to see how this story transforms our main characters in any way. I guess you could say that the point of this plot was to confess Mike's love for Elle, but this is a really stupid and annoyingly roundabout way of establishing that. Especially when at the top of the season, this felt basically already in play. Nothing really impressive has taken place over the course of this season to really evolve or explore this relationship. And quickly reflecting back on one of the 3 resolution scenes this duo shares, I stand by my opinion that Mike's sincere apology of how he acted and why feels very much forced and underdeveloped. You've given me this character, who I've really taken a disliking to this season, and summarized his intentions and shortcomings as some poignant realization without much foundation. It really feels like he just comes up with it on the spot, when nothing in his character up to this point has signaled that this self-realization was even in play. You give me a bum story and you pay it off in a cop-out, lame-ass bum way. No Stranger Things, no! Bad season! Why does this season hate giving these characters well-established and rightfully earned resolutions? I have no idea. Why then do they choose to include this meandering and irrelevant plot anyway? Well, I hypothesize that it is mainly this annoying and pointless because the writers wanted to shove in more unnecessary comedy into the show. And that's when you notice that the essence of this storyline is viral and expands far deeper into the biology of this season. Where are the clickers? Because I want to turn this shit off. This season, for some reason beyond humanity's current ability to comprehend, tries to be a lot funnier. And oh, it's so painful, let me tell ya. Any ounce of seriousness or maturity that season 1 or even the second season had with its themes is completely disregarded in favor of contrived comedic premises. Take, for example, this scene with Erica that, if you couldn't guess, I despise. It's just a scene where they go over their plans to break into this mysterious elevator. But then, the conversation derails itself and becomes a spotlight for an Erica monologue about capitalism and child endangerment. All of which is supposed to be funny and cute, but my god, if it doesn't go on for what feels like forever.
You want my help? This USS
Do you know what capitalism is? First child endangered. Free ice cream.
It's this strange phenomenon where the comedy that's trying to be written is more to do with the amount of things a character says rather than an actual joke being set up and paid off. The whole bit with this scene is just Erica as a bratty, precocious child going on and on about her involvement in this plan, which on paper sounds like a good idea, but in practice, it reads like a massive deleted scene full of improv. The scene doesn't even need to be in the show at all. The only reason for its inclusion is so that Erica as a comedic character can have a moment to shine. But she never frickin' stops shining, and God, I wish she would.
You need help with that?
No.
Well, I mean, it's taking a while, so
No shit, Sherlock.
All right, so if we don't find a more efficient method to stop these things, we're never gonna find help. And your ice cream buddies are screwed. And Tina always covers. But if I'm not going to be just parties, I mean, if I don't find out that you're responsible, we're gonna put
I don't care about Tina or Uncle Jack's party.
I believe there is nothing worse than a joke that isn't funny from the start, going on and on, with very little active substance besides a visualized depiction of synapses firing and shorting out. Because that is like torture, especially when I know that these writers are capable of creating naturally funny moments with humorously genuine characters. That's the inherent problem I find with this type of comedic writing. It bases itself too much in a meandering cat's cradle of word vomit that it isn't able to flourish beyond that.
Not my feet, dumbass. Push my ass.
What?
Touch my butt. I don't care. Come on. Harder.
Push it!
Harder.
Don't play with my leg. I'm not playing. I have terrible footing.
Here you go. I'm gonna just shove you. Ready?
You're shoving me?
1, 2.
Which I feel it desperately needs to, otherwise it handicaps the scene.
Что, американская полиция?
English! You speak English?
Пожалуйста, сэр, опустите пистолет.
I can't understand you.
Мы ничего плохого не делали, ничего нелегального. Ничего нелегального. Мы механики.
Even worse, the show makes such bizarre decisions of when to layer its comedy with the concurrent plot. There's a scene later on in the show where Elle is trying to find someone or something. I really don't care. But the whole tension of the scene is interrupted by the group arguing about new Coke for like a full minute before the show has to reel them back in and point out that this is a really stupid time to be bickering about this. Hey, Stranger Things, just because you acknowledge that something you've written is dumb or silly doesn't excuse it or exonerate it from seriously detracting the intensity of the scene. But seriously, think about it. Why did they include this? It adds nothing, no purpose, no through road. Maybe if it was actually funny, I might give it a pass, which I'm guessing was the Duffer Brothers mantra when writing this entire season. It's not just that it's juvenile or distracting or undesirable or useless, but that I just don't find it funny at all. And the chips for this season go all in on its comedy. What's that? You want another example? Okay, here's another example. Remember the scene where the gang is in the elevator and they need to get out and they're like, hey, press the open doors button. The open door button isn't working. Are you sure? You just press the button, guy. It's not working. Oh, well, maybe Steve should press the button. Steve, get over and press the button. You're pressing the button, it's not working. Are you sure you're pressing the button? Are you sure you're pressing? And then the elevator falls to the ground! And also, there's this really cool scene where Dustin and Steve are looking for suspicious activity, and in an actual scene that was written for a television show, they're following this really suspicious guy through the mall. But funny! Turns out he was a jazzercise instructor who wears a big black bomber jacket and carries his boombox in a duffel bag and wears sunglasses indoors. You know what? I'm realizing now that the Steve and Dustin arc really is the comedy-packed plot of this season. Like, these sorts of moments, of course, occur and infest the other characters and plots in this season, but here it is a prime example of how forced they are. Everything about it feels like they're either filling time or killing time by inserting needless humor into every situation the characters find themselves in, which I do in fact see as a problem, because the best part about the humor from the first season was that it did arise naturally. The humor came from the precocious behavior of these children coming face to face with a manifestation of their Dungeons and Dragons fantasy obsession. We see how these imaginative and excitable children react to being thrown into this fantastical scenario by watching them instead of hearing endless dialogue passages unraveling every comedic prospect about the situation. The comedy came from character rather than specifically facilitated scenarios. And so, I'm led to believe that the way the Duffer Brothers have essentially turned this season into a comedy shows that it is not their strong suit. It might be fine in offhanded spurts, but these scenes take up the full attention of the audience, as if nothing else matters except this comedy gold on screen. And it's just like, no, I feel it completely disrupts and insults any plot or tension that the show is trying to work with. It's like they have no discipline of when to be funny and when to be serious, and instead just fumbles the tone of this show so bad that it's just a complete hot mess. And the best example of how exasperating this complete fumble is happens towards the very end of the last episode of the season. Picture this, things could not be more tense. The Fichtean curve is at its highest point. The big old mind flayer, made out of human bile and gore, is terrorizing the Starcourt Mall. Everyone's in place, ready to take this thing down and close the gate underneath all this catastrophe for good. But there's one thing left the group needs. Apparently, the conspiracy theorist Murray incorrectly gave the code to Hopper and Joyce, even though that seems like the one thing he would never forget. But alas, Planck's constant evades his memory. But huzzah! Dustin's girlfriend, who at this point in the show has proven to be their own conspiracy theory, is proven real and requested upon to give up the code they need to save the world. But, in order for her to do this, she insists that they need to sing the Never-Ending Story theme song. And so, of course they do! Believe it or not, this is nowhere near as angry as I will eventually get with this season, but why would you do this? The only reason this is really in the show, besides answering the question of whether or not this girl Dustin's been teasing us about is real, is to forcefully shove nostalgia and comedy into our faces. There's no good plot reason for this. Murray could have easily just remembered the code that he was supposed to remember, but no. Instead, the writers felt this scene was so important for the show that they stopped all the tension right in its tracks to have a minute-long scene where the two sing the Never-Ending Story theme song. There is no Chekhov's gun, there is only Chekhov's depression. And it makes me, I feel, reasonably angry, because you have busted my balls all throughout this season by continuously interrupting what meager interest I already had in the story and its asinine characters, and now you give me one last middle finger and pull this crap out of your rectum. This season has taken any comedic prospects and accolades the previous couple had to render a discount model with weaker characters, bloated dialogue, and irritating comedy. A misstep that they doubled down on in season 4 with characters like Argyle being the high guy.
What do you think, Byers? Call it a weeder.
Get it? He's high. Like the weed kind.
You get it, man? Like a feeder? Weeder.
What's that? What's his character like? Anything interesting?
What's that?
What else do you want? He's the high guy. Surfs up and toke up and the stuff. What the fuck is going on? Woo, ding, 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 ding. Side note, yes, I know this is already getting a bit scatterbrained, but welcome to another episode of Will Watch. Today, I want to take a look at our boy Will Byers and talk to you about how I feel he is the saddest example of this season's character Onslaught. For the entirety of the first season, Will was basically absent from all of the group hijinks and instead got to fear for his life 8 episodes in a row. Then, in season 2, Will is finally back with his friends, except he's frequently bullied by the local goofballs, and he's also tormented by a gigantic frickin' mind flayer monster that's stalking the town of Hawkins, and subsequently takes over Will's body, basically forcing him to sit this season out too, as everyone else tries to figure out what the hell is wrong with him. Now, with season 3, the gang is finally back together again and can play some good old-fashioned Dungeons and Dragons. Except, they're all bored with childish things now, as girls are their new main priority. Once again, leaving Will in the dust, since he's not that into girls, because he's gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And if that wasn't enough, the writers decided to make Will, who I may remind you has been a consistent underdog throughout this entire show, an insufferable dweeb. I can't say it's not understandable, since, you know, he's kind of been waiting for the return of normality for like 3 seasons now. But why did they have to do him dirty like this? With the goofy medieval music and the Will the Wise garb, they made this kid pathetic. This is a part of Will's arc for the first half of this season, where every time the stupid romance plot intrudes the story, Will just goes, "Hey, can we go back to playing D&D now?" Which I can only guess means that he is a surrogate for audience members like me who want the show to quit this nonsense and return to the cool stuff that I actually subscribe to Netflix to see, only for the gang to go, "Lol, no, XD." Which is a great middle finger to everything this show built up to this point, Stranger Things. I'll give you that. Ultimately, Will's story this season is about the sadness of seeing most of his friends growing up and over the things they enjoyed when they were younger, with him seeming to be the last one standing. This all culminates to a point where he dramatically runs off into the rain and destroys Castle Byers. Which, I'll admit, the first time I saw it, it felt a bit out of nowhere, and more like he was throwing a hissy fit than something I was actually supposed to be engaging with. But the problem is that the show hasn't really sat down with Will to digest everything that's happened. This scene is essentially doing the heavy lifting for Will's arc this season, because everything you really need to know or care about is conveyed through this one scene, and then it's quickly shoved back to the sidelines once the actual show kicks into gear. But you know what really pisses me off about Will's situation? This despicable season chooses to highlight boring, useless, annoying, aggravating, contrived character arcs that are poorly written, explored, and fulfilled, when in the wings are some incredibly fascinating characters and premises that could easily be uncovered to create actually engrossing storylines. But the show doesn't. Robin gets a great scene at the end of the season where she comes out as gay in a heart-to-heart with Steve, which is really nice. Shame they didn't bother building that up anymore or exploring that dynamic between the two with subtle, gradual hints. That'd be dumb, right? Well, how about Will, a character so traumatized by his experiences in the Upside Down that he hasn't had time to properly explore or understand his own sexual feelings? Maybe he could have bonded with Robin and they could have had a special dynamic. Actually, that'd be pretty dumb too, right? Let's instead focus way too many scenes on funny gags and Mike's lemon of a love story with Elle. Maybe tag in something with Nancy and Jonathan. Nah, who cares? There's too much much character there. How about we pivot back to Hopper fighting a Terminator dude? Why? Yeah, because it's cool, and I like cool. How about a mall montage where the girls are trying on clothes and the guys are going into Victoria's Secret? Sure, stuff it in there, why not? Come on guys, we've got shit to do. Let's get this ball rolling! What I'm trying to get at is that what we're given in terms of exploring these more compelling characters isn't enough, especially considering how much time is given to all of the crap that I've already complained about. Season 3 made the decision to pretty much pass on these characters to focus so much more time on other stupid BS that bloats this season into a big, fat, airheaded nothing burger. It pops like a balloon when I sink my teeth into it and leaves me feeling hungry, depressed, and unsatisfied, and yearning for what could have been. So kind of like my wedding night. It breaks my heart to know what we could have had in the face of what we ended up with. And Will is probably the saddest example of this. And if that wasn't enough of a burn, in season 4, when Will, Joyce, Jonathan, and Eleven all moved to California, the now high schoolers who chose to stay in Hawkins suddenly get right back into Dungeons and Dragons again, which, like, is Will the toxic friend of the group? Because I'd hate to think that he's the black sheep keeping you from enjoying the things that you really love. This setup. But that's about it, I think, for the green screen for now, so I'm gonna put it away. Will got did so dirty in this show. It's just so bad. But it gets worse. Way worse. It's finally time that I get to talk to you about what is probably the singular reason why I decided to make this video in the first place. I am about to lift a massive weight off my shoulders that I have been carrying since 2019. Hopper and Joyce.
But I'm thinking maybe we can meet up there, like tonight, like 7 o'clock.
Psychopath.
You know, of
Also,
course,
we could bring
unless something comes up, which,
because somehow
you know, it really happens. No, you outsmart your children from the big bad 4th of July celebration.
You can handle this. Don't turn around and walk me up first. Check it out. Don't do anything if it gets me away.
Shut up! Oh my god, I don't care! I fucking hate these two, alright? You want to talk about brutal character assassinations? Let's talk about my boy Hopper, because I'm pretty sure this was an organized attack against my boy.
What is wrong with my boy?
You think Hopper's reign of tyranny ended with infecting Mike and subsequently the rest of the group with baboon energy because of his involvement? Well, that cancer has a source, ladies and gentlemen. This man is a menace and he must be stopped. This season, he's like a discount Midas. Every character he converses with turns insufferable. So Hopper is just absolutely chuffed over how he handled the Mike and Elle situation that he asks Joyce out on a date. Also, fun fact, her previous boyfriend died in a horrific fashion by getting eviscerated by demodogs.
It's gonna be okay. Remember Bob Newby, superhero.
But enough time has passed where Hopper's charm is just simply irresistible. However, Joyce is currently having that time of the show where she notices something odd and supernatural and tries to figure it out herself after everyone thinks she's crazy. This totally isn't just a recycled motif that pales in comparison to the genuinely well-meaning and emotional reasoning for this behavior in season 1.
A magnet!
Remember when Joyce had an emotional weight facilitating her insistence of the perceptively delusional and wildly strange things that were happening to her? Well, forget about that. Joyce becomes just another victim to his revamped black hole and becomes an insanely diluted version of herself. She forgets about their dinner date to meet with GQ's sexiest teacher alive, Mr. Clark, to talk about her magnets. But oh boy, if only she knew what Pandora's box she was opening with this action. Hopper gets obscenely drunk and bitter over being stood up once, and when she visits him the next morning to regurgitate her discovery, he couldn't care less. It honestly wouldn't matter if she had a demo dog literally attached to her spine. Hopper is just a little too pissed to give a shit. And they have a fight 1/100th the intelligence of Nancy and Jonathan's, and there's this goofy, quirky music playing in the background that honestly gets on my nerves way more than it should. But the spotlight of my depression is with Hopper's attitude. This one absence of a date sends Hopper down a path of arrogance and self-righteousness, and it is not lovable and goofy, it's just upsetting. They have more arguments of similar aimlessness throughout the season, and each time it just shows how sad and pathetic Hopper has become over this one issue that he just won't get over. There's a scene where they've caught this Russian operative, but he's refusing to cooperate. So, fed up, Hopper locks him out of the bunker and tosses him his car keys? Then he's barricading the door so neither Joyce or Murray can get out to prevent this fucking insanely stupid decision. They even mock him that he's starting the car and that their only lead to finding their kids and making the town safe again is about to run off. But he's like,
yeah, I'm calling this bluff.
And do you want to know the worst part about this scene? He was right. They walk outside to see Alexei paused at the end of the driveway, which gives Hopper this just fucking awfully smug grin, because the show basically let him be an unlikable asshole who makes stupid decisions and then made him justified in his behavior. Fuck you, Stranger Things. This is bullshit. I cannot stress this enough. Practically around every corner, Hopper is ready and waiting to just pathetically continue this argument that, by the 4th or 5th time, has gotten incredibly stale and pointless.
This interminable bickering was amusing at first, but it's getting very stale and we've still got a long drive ahead of us.
Hey, Stranger Things, just because you acknowledge that something you've written is dumb or silly doesn't excuse it or exonerate it from being annoying. And you want to know something funny? This sort of behavior was handled way better from nearly every standpoint in season 2. Remember when Hopper was basically housing Elle and keeping her secret from the authorities? Well, at one point, Elle sneaks out on her own to see Mike, and there's a lot of mixed emotions from this. But when she gets back, Hopper is really pissed off.
Friends don't lie. Isn't that your bullshit saying? Hey, don't walk away from me!
He's understandably angry because he wants to keep her safe and doesn't want anyone else getting to her and taking her away. But he also goes a bit too far, calling her a brat and swearing at her, and like season 3, this behavior is a bit too brutal and undesirable and makes him, at least in the moment, kind of unlikable.
I hate you.
Yeah, well, I'm not so crazy about you either. You know why? Because you're a brat. Hey! Open this door! Open the damn door! You want to go out in the world? You better grow up! Grow the hell up!
We're not supposed to agree with his actions or how he handled the situation. However, unlike season 3, Hopper actually takes accountability for his actions and apologizes. That's not something he does in season 3, I don't know if you noticed, but nowhere is it to be seen that he has any accountability for his asshole-ish behavior. Doubly so, from this conflict, the show actually explores the repercussions of his actions. There's this great scene where Hopper is breaking down in his car, radioing to Elle, profusely apologizing and trying to make up for it somehow. And there's this beautiful shot that pans from the radio across the empty cabin, showing that Elle has discovered more about her biological mother and has run away to try and find her. In contrast to anything in season 3, this shot is fucking magical. Hopper was understandably overprotective and kept certain things secret from her, but this behavior eventually led Elle to going out on her own and even getting her own special episode to find out who she truly is. We don't have to talk about that episode. It was fine, but it was also the seed for season 3's problem of annoyingly interrupting key moments of tension for some other bullshit. But it's fine. It was a fine episode. It's not a bad episode on its own. It's just like, for having one teaser at the very top of the season and waiting 7 episodes to pay it off, it's just like, that's like, it wasn't the best way they could have done that. To beautifully cap this conflict off, in the final episode, Hopper and Elle are driving to the big gate that they gotta close, and they have this deeply emotional heart-to-heart where there's pretty much nothing but the ambiance of the truck running and the empty silence between their conversation, perfectly punctuating the easygoing sincerity of this moment.
I'm not mad, kid. I just want to know where you've been.
To see Mama.
Elle says that she shouldn't have left, Hopper apologizes for his actions, and even goes one step further in antagonizing himself.
Sometimes I feel like I'm just some kind of black hole or something.
Black hole?
Yeah, it's it's this thing in outer space. It's like, it sucks everything towards it and destroys it.
It's so much better than any of the trash moments from season 3. Perhaps mostly because of how genuinely emotional it is and how well built up and handled it was. It's honestly incredibly heartwarming and sad and sorrowful. And because of that, and also how they own up to their actions and promise to be better and most importantly, apologize, it strengthens the emotional bond I have with these characters and does a fantastic job at weighing on the tension without distracting from it. Gosh, such a good scene. And you know what's worse? Season 3 gives this unlikable new Hopper a completely unearned resolution that he barely deserves on a silver platter. Keeping in mind the constant bickering behavior between these two, towards the end of the season, Joyce is just like, "Hey, do you want to go on another date?" And boom! Resolution! Who needs a satisfying conclusion to this character who has actively been an abhorrent asshole for the whole season when you can just slap one on at the very end and forget about the whole thing? Now, there are scenes sprinkled incredibly sparingly across this season that do try to endear Hopper and sometimes even succeed in doing so, but those bits are effectively moot when in contrast to the vast number of other scenes consistently reinforcing his nasty behavior. He's still awful and insufferable, and those scenes where he's made thoughtful and sincere for a brief reprieve don't evolve his character or alter his decision-making. They only serve to make an opening for a weak resolution with Joyce at the end. Those scenes just end up being pennies rounded down from the dollar.
Oh, and please, don't give me that dead daughter sob story. Because I just don't care.
And they give him this sad finale as he supposedly dies when Joyce closes the gate, and it's played up really sad, and we're supposed to be crying buckets of tears. Meanwhile, I am having to shed a figurative tear over the lament of what a god-awful garbage season this was. So many characters, poorly written in terms of motivation and plot contrivance, but also in their awful, unlikable behavior. All the mystery and childhood whimsy that the show had successfully built up with these characters, all their emotionally gripping conflicts and problems and fears treated like Will Ferrell's Mark Twain Award.
Boy, okay.
And while I thought this was the most hopeless I had ever felt when seeing a show evolve in such a heinous way, the real nail in the coffin, and subsequently the most angering and depressing thing amongst everything I disliked about Season 3, comes at the very tail end with Hopper's speech. After the whole saving the world thing for a third time has had a chance to cool down, Joyce finds a note amongst Hopper's things. It's the note that she gave him to help give the talk to Elle, but with some spontaneous additions. And as Elle reads it to herself, we hear Hopper's fatherly voice muse about change that matches up perfectly with the imagery of the Byers moving out of Hawkins. And it's a really heartwarming closer for the season, and it feels great to hear Hopper's hopeful and optimistic and charismatic rumination score this finale. My problem with this scene? Who the fuck is this guy, and where has he been through the entire season? I don't know if you noticed, but the Hopper we've been following for the majority of the season bears little to absolutely no resemblance to the guy we've watched from seasons 1 and 2. Sure, the Hopper we knew could be an asshole. Sure, could be a bit mean sometimes when provoked, but he always did it out of a deep-rooted love, compassion, and care for others. This guy does everything out of petty arrogance and pathetic immaturity. The thing with the car, not out of protection, but out of ego. How he was with Joyce, repeatedly bitter without any care for circumstances. How he was with Mike? Valid, because he was a little shit, but no repercussions either introspectively or from others onto him. He is an untouchable protagonist that's an asshole and a douche, and worst of all, an unlikable prick. When Hopper lost his shit at Elle in the second season, sure, he was an asshole and went overboard, but it had consequences. In season 3, sure, his actions result in Mike and Elle splitting up, but none of that ever really falls back onto Hopper. In fact, there's never really a chance for him to apologize for that, and instead, that issue becomes this aggravating trope of misunderstanding that needlessly corrupts the characters into bickering about stupid shit that never would have arisen naturally if it weren't for Hopper's minor blowout at Mike. But also on the writer's weird insistence that this is all funny and good. And the worst part is that in these final few moments, you are trying to convince me that this was the same Hopper all throughout the season. You're using this sappy music that you're reusing, by the way, to manipulate these somber, reflective emotions out of me. And even tricking me into thinking that this abhorrent asshole was somehow a redeemable love bug this whole time, when in reality, any part of him that you're trying to convince me this is died when he first talked to Mike. If they chose to explore these feelings further, it would have made more sense for Hopper to be standoffish and rude, and Joyce could be helping him, but instead, they fucked everything up, made the duo unlikable and insufferable, and used it to force in so much comedy that it ruined the story. This jerk, who you've had peddling this annoyingly bitter romance and subpar subplot for the entire season is not even a shaving of the man who we used to know. All it took was this scene for the Hopper I know and love to disappear, evaporate, dematerialize, and in his place, a slithery little snake with a new coat drenched in a viscous slime of buffoonish self-loathing, pettiness, ego, arrogance, and all the ways in which a character like this could be unlikable. You bastards killed Hopper. However, top 10 anime plot twists of all time. Despite my fervent dislike for everything Season 3 put on the table, with its egregious character assassinations, uninteresting plots, and mishandled comedy, I do have a little bit of respect for this season. Just a little, don't you get carried away now. I'm not sure if I made this clear, but apart from how Season 3 compares in its overall subjective quality, it's also incredibly different. The Duffer Brothers were quoted as saying, Season 3 was more like we're just playing in a sandbox, right? It's like, oh, we've got all our toys, let's play. And in hindsight, that makes total sense. From how seemingly detached it was from the overarching narrative, to the lighthearted stakes and generally juvenile nature of its characters, settings, and circumstances, it almost felt like some sort of bizarro fan fiction of Stranger Things. And I kind of have to respect that, because a lot of the time I think about diminishing returns. And considering how I generally felt that Season 2, while odd in certain places, mostly felt like a lesser repeat of the first season, going in such a batshit crazy, out of left field direction for this season arguably rejuvenated the show. Sure, Season 2 had its intense monster battles, but Season 3 is where the show really embraces the legacy of, and I'd like to coin this term, a television blockbuster. The scale grew exponentially with a gigantic neon-infused mall as the setting, and a grand monster battle with bright lights and fireworks and sad music and character deaths. It was a huge display. This sort of direction only further shaped Season 4, as that season is indisputably more grandiose and epic and loud and sad and all of the feelings you might expect going to see a multi-million-dollar Hollywood blockbuster, but instead on a streaming service. Season 4's numbers broke records, and people loved and talked about that season with near endless praise, showing that the awkward misstep of Season 3 really influenced a stronger step forward to refining and improving upon this new direction. My argument would be, would you rather a show you love gradually get worse and watered down with each subsequent season, decreasing in its quality and therefore its reputation? Or would you wish for it to take bold steps forward to try and reinvigorate itself with a new, passionate energy? I know my answer, and unfortunately, this is what I got from my support. At the time of writing this, there is currently an elimination poll on the Stranger Things subreddit to determine the best scene of the show. And when the never-ending story scene got voted out immediately, I saw a lot of people who absolutely loved it confused, even though the results speak for themselves. And while I can sit back and seethe at the mere thought of this scene, I can't really fault people's enjoyment of it. Because while it embodies what I hate about Season 3, it also embodies what a lot of other people love about Season 3. It's this fun roller coaster ride with comedy that works for them and emotional scenes that bring them to tears. And while I can argue for days about how I feel these changes have made the show inferior, especially considering Season 3's missed potential within its own changes, I respect and understand that it's just totally a different vibe from what it started out as. And I find that interesting because not many other examples come to mind where a show changes its vibe and tone dramatically halfway through its series, dividing its halves into what feel like separate shows. It's an odd situation as a viewer, because that change can easily alienate an existing fanbase to cultivate a new one with different accolades and preferences that will instead be catered to. While I do think that Season 4 is leagues better than Season 3, despite some recurring grievances, one thing that I lament most about this new direction is the loss of the show's characters. Truthfully, I have such diminished investment in the characters of these newer seasons, to the point where all I see are action figures in a toy set perpetually fighting the big baddie. We've had many seasons to grow with these characters, but now we only get a sliver of that same maturity and grace and nuance of exploring their dynamics and flaws the show once had. This sucks because I would argue that it's such an integral part of the show, but with each subsequent season, I feel like that argument is operating on a calorie deficit, because it's losing weight. There are fragments of interesting characters, but they're all drowned out by the spectacle of scale and computer-generated intensity that what I take away from Season 4 is not its characters, but rather pictures and amusement park ideas. Feel free to disagree, but unfortunately, this is just how I feel. And to close things out, am I excited for the 5th and final season concluding this epic tale? I mean, yeah, of course. I'm kind of already too deep into this show as it is, that while I may not love everything they do with it, it'll be the conclusion to the story that I fell in love with so many years ago. Plus, I mean, it's just gonna be an absolute spectacle. Think of all the money that Netflix is gonna throw at this production, and think about how massive the stakes are now that the entire town of Hawkins is essentially hosting the Grand Canyon of interdimensional portals. One thing I do want to point out is that I don't know if it's going to be that satisfying of an ending, simply because I've already said goodbye to these characters like 3 times already. They won in the first season, and then they won again in the second, and then they won again in the third, and by that point, I was kind of done with these characters, especially since nothing really new or intriguing was being explored with them. So while this upcoming season will introduce the ultimate goodbye of goodbyes, there's still gonna be an animated spin-off after this, so I really don't think I'm going to be missing these characters that have permanently breached the cultural zeitgeist. That's just my opinion, of course. We'll have to see how Season 5 pans out, which I am predicting will be more of the same, just louder. That's it. And just like that, my spirit has been cleansed. I am free from these shackles. I can breathe fresh air once again. So what do you guys think? Was this show's leap from grounded drama to insane 80s action blockbuster a good decision, or something you weren't really fond of? And what do you think about that transformation as a whole? Do you disagree with me? I'm sure some of you do. If you have any passionate disagreements with any of my takes and opinions, or you have something you would like to add to the discussion, please, I implore you, put them down in the comments, because I would love to hear what you all have to say, even if it's really mean. There's a plane flying overhead, so I think we're pretty much done for the day. Oh, I'm sorry. You clicked the too long didn't watch option. Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. Let's just yes. No, here we go. I guess this is for you. In my opinion, what made the first season of Stranger Things so iconic and favorable feels diluted and disregarded for more of a lighthearted 80s-centric iteration in Season 3, with alterations in the form of now unlikable characters and uninteresting storylines. While I do dislike this change, I respect that the show fully commits to its new form, and I understand that a lot of the popularity and hype around the show is perpetuated by this enhanced style. Season 3 transmogrifies the show I once adored into a pop song cover of itself. Yeah, that about covers it. This video, honestly, became way bigger than I ever thought it would. Like, I thought this was going to be a nice and easy 20, maybe 30-minute video. So I don't know how the hell this came to be. But I hope you enjoyed it. I have a Discord if you want to yell at me in real time. Please support me on Patreon so I can do more fun things like this. Like and subscribe and make the numbers that are by my name go up. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. That's the video.